So I think when our partnership started, when we started to learn and research and understand what partnership could do for both sectors, we definitely knew where our gaps were, knew what our needs were, knew where we could improve the offer we had for our children. And we approached you with an idea in our heads as to what it could do for us and how it could benefit our school. And I think it'd be really good to hear about how it came from your side, because it has to be a mutual thing. There has to be mutually beneficial things for this to work properly.
But I think that was the difference. I think it was the difference, Laura, in terms of you approached us not just with this is what we'd like to do, but asking us the question, what do you think it could do for your students? And I think that's never been the conversation before.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, because we always think about what can we do in terms of support, in terms of enrichment, but how does it translate back to our pupils?
Yeah.
And I think, from our students' point of view, older students, so students who are 16 years and above, who are giants, aren't they? When they walk into your primary school.
Actual adult people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they are. They're seen as teachers. And we've had to tell our students that you're not just an A-level student, but you are seen as a teacher at their school. And I think the impact on our students is that sense of confidence.
Responsibility.
I was going to say responsibility, that sense of what I'm doing actually matters. I can't not turn up.
No.
I can't not follow the policies that your school lays down in the same way as every other teacher does. It really is a sense of giving real ownership to the older student to say, what I does matters.
And for our children to respect and see that they are young adults and they have come to do a job and they do turn up and they have a positive attitude and they are consistent in their commitment to the partnership. I think that's another thing that's been really key, is that one of our needs was consistency. We had a lot of transient adults in children's lives, and for these adult children to turn up week in, week out with a smile on their face and remember the children's names and remember what they'd done last week was really important. The needs from our side were that we had a desire to improve the curriculum offer in terms of what our children were doing. And to do that, we wanted other people to come and help support in groups that not necessarily we had expertise in. And that's where this is sort of grown from.
And that's the challenge for us too, because the challenge for us is to ensure that we create enough time for our students to be committed, time for our students to know that it matters, and that other staff realise that we can't have other things which invade or intrude into that time. We are committing to you in the same ways that you're trusting us. And we need to honour that and make sure that every single week when you're expecting our students, they're there and our students are prepared. And that's a bigger picture for our students. They are the responsible adults. And they write about it, they reflect upon it, and they use it in terms of their own skill process and skill evaluation.
The partnership has been amazing at meeting our children's needs. So, for example, we have had a significant number of children who come from disadvantaged backgrounds and just wouldn't have any opportunities to access some of the things that the partnership has offered us. I think we've got 30% of children at the moment who are pupil premium. We also have 36% of children who come from free school meals, and we target these children and offer them things that have been offered to us through yourself. So they've had things like attending theatre experiences, they've been able to talk to footballers online, become inspired to develop their careers in the future by offering things like a meeting with David Winston, the famous doctor, and just lots of things that we possibly couldn't afford because our children don't have the funding or don't come from the backgrounds that would allow us to do that.
The nice thing about our partnership is the relationships that we have. So I call it the WhatsApp relationship, where somebody at your other school so well that they can just sort of WhatsApp you and go, have you got this? We're thinking about doing this. Well, this is a problem. And on a regular basis, we meet with our head teachers. We have head teacher dinners. We, get them together for a drink. We make it social, and so we're friends with our partner schools. And I think that makes a big difference. People feeling more comfortable and more open, and being able to kind of go, there's a hole in the roof. What do we do? So for us, we try not to assume anything. Everything comes from a genuine opportunity or need. So it's standing on the sidelines of another event with a head teacher having a chat, and that head teacher saying, this is something at the moment that we could do with. Equally, for our students, a big part of our students' education is future workplace skills. And being able to give our students the opportunity to learn through experiential learning, actually going out of our walls and doing things. And, you know, some of the big events our kids will do photography, videography, they'll be journalists for the day. They'll make banners and so on. But the important lesson, I had a lesson a few years ago where I went out to speak to one of our head teachers, and I made an assumption that their needs were literacy, numeracy, STEM, you know, that kind of thing. And the head teacher just said to me, look, I'm going to stop you there because my biggest concern this morning is our 10-year-old children being used as drug mules across county lines. And you walk away from the school thinking, right, I got that wrong. You know, there's more here than I initially thought, and I've made an assumption. And so you just have to constantly remind yourself to talk to people who are on the ground, who you know what the needs are.
And that's one of the strengths of the partnership, being able to tap into people, have a better understanding. And it's not just about the academia, it's also about the personal, social and emotional of the child, because and if we don't get that right, we can't
absolutely.
begin. So it's really fundamental for many of them to be able to utilise some of those things on offer through the partnership.
Yeah, and using the businesses. So, you know, you take something like esports. I don't know a huge amount about esports, but as a school, we want to do esports. So we want to do esports with you, and we want to invite your kids to, you know, challenge themselves against our kids and so on. But we will partner with an organisation that knows about that stuff. And so, you know, you have your banks that do financial literacy. You have social media providers that help us with online etiquette. You know, so we will tap into our industry, university, and charity partners too.
A lot comes down to relationships. We have a fantastic network of secondary schools, state secondary schools, local to our school. We're in a large collaboration of 18 schools. And because we know colleagues, peers, heads of departments at the same level, teachers who become friends, it's very easy for them to pick up the phone and say, you are a physics teacher, you have radioactive sources, we don't. Can we come around and use them? And of course, that in itself isn't a partnership. They're coming over using our equipment and our teachers will help muck in. But what it leads to is ongoing relationships that then really do become mutually beneficial. So the example I've just given there then led to what has become a much bigger project under the British Science Association. We now run the Gold Crest Award, where we welcome children from 10, 12 local state secondary schools to collaborate with our students on undergraduate level research projects. And I think if we didn't have the networks in place, if we hadn't become friends with teachers from our local schools, then that wouldn't have happened.
And I think for state primary schools, there's no surprise where the gap is, and it's in the arts, it's in the co-curricular areas, it's in the sport. There's a huge problem, particularly in some of the London boroughs, about obesity. So in my borough, in Hillingdon, 25% of Year 6 children are obese. So there's a huge need in terms of activity levels and exploiting some of the partnership facilities on offer, astros, forest schools, swimming pools where appropriate, climbing walls, experiences that our children can't have on our site, and actually we're priced out of providing for them within our tight budgets. But in terms of the arts, our partnership is very, very strong. It's wonderful to be able to pick up the phone to our partner, our point of contact, and say, we really would like to do something musical, and then get involved in projects such as a night at the West End, which we did recently, where our children sang with a range of different schools, West End professionals and the Royal Philharmonic. It was absolutely mind-blowing for them, and you'd never know what seeds being planted in some of those children if they hadn't had that experience. And I truly believe that without that partnership and without that network, I wouldn't, on my budget and my resources, have been able to provide that for our children.
We could share any number of similar stories, but where a primary school or a state secondary school in those natural discussions presents an area of need, some of which we can help with, we do what we can to ensure that our students are then engaged in supporting that. So you mentioned one of the things that we've talked about is MFL, Modern Foreign Languages, of which there are gaps. Our Year 12s now are supporting a number of local schools in that particular subject, and any others where they're working very closely with the children. The younger children are learning from them, gaining a huge amount. Of course, our Year 12s, having never taught before, are gaining a huge amount learning to teach as they do.
There are a huge number of challenges facing our education system across the country. We operate within a highly stratified system of education where the differences are much more nuanced and layered than just independent and state schools. We have a huge array of differences in attainment in state schools. We have independent schools that operate on different models. So I think where partnerships come in helpful is they're able to kind of pinpoint some of those areas between those layers where we can bring value to individual students and draw on the strengths of those other layers of the school system to build in to other schools where they need it, and vice versa. We have the opportunity to listen to those students. We have the opportunity to listen to the heads of those state schools with high pupil premium and other indicators of educational disadvantage, but also to use our freedom as a sector to think really carefully about educational disadvantage, what it actually means and where it might be moving next, not just reacting to the problem that the schools are putting in front of us. We have the opportunity to be proactive and perhaps address tomorrow's problems with this as well as today's. There is a huge problem with collecting data in this area. I feel like partnerships have to prove themselves in a way that not every academic field necessarily and every educational field needs to prove themselves. And it's really difficult to prove your value in a field where it's about narratives and it's about changing lives and it's about stories. So we have to shout at the people in power to say, actually, yeah, we might struggle to bring all these, these quantitative figures out, but we have some incredibly powerful stories about changing the lives of young people, and that as a data form is just as valuable as anything else.
As well as providing experiences for those children, it's also about educating staff to make sure they really understand. So, for example, making sure that our conferences are geared up to have keynote speakers who can educate our teaching staff and our support staff. So addressing the needs not just of the children, but the staff who are working with them so that they really understand the factors involved. In terms of gathering data, the schools are expected to gather a lot of data, and I think a really useful thing for partnerships to do is to look at that data and decide how that can be addressed in terms of the planning for the partnership moving forward. So in our partnership, we look at the classic Key Stage 2 reading, writing, maths data, and we use that to support the training for the year ahead, particularly within our hub work. So we break down into hubs. We have 32 primary schools broken down into smaller hubs, and that means we can really pinpoint projects that we can fund that will support those smaller groups of schools. We can, focus in on the area of need for those schools, whether it might be phonics or maths, and really direct the training for those schools, whether it's with bringing in external speakers, whether it's doing something with the children that might support their learning. So what we're making sure is that we use the data to inform the choices that we make, which will benefit the children perhaps for that cohort and moving forward, but also to develop the staff so that there's sustainability in their development as teachers and as educators moving forwards.
Things like swimming.
Yeah.
Swimming is a massive problem, and it's a major issue in a lot of counties. And like most independent schools, we've got a swimming pool. They've got children who can't swim. It seems an obvious thing to be able to do that. What else comes as a result of that? I would have said actually that we're now looking at running a swimming coaching course because there aren't enough swimming teachers.
Yeah.
Because there are not enough swimming teachers, you can't bring the children across. Why don't we train our sixth form to help and be assistants in that?
We never really knew how bad it was in terms of the amount of students that can swim, wasn't it?
Yeah, and again, the sort of third-party charity who drove that and gave us the data so that we're not just chasing sort of causes that we want to chase. There has to be some specific reason. There has to be people who understand where the problems are that can direct us. And for us, because we both know that charity well, we both trust them, and it became really apparent that actually things like the swimming came born out of a rowing program that we wanted to do, that as an independent school we're able to do. We then found the children couldn't swim. How obvious was it then to go into the swimming partnership?
Swimming's a massive need. That's the joy of the private school having a pool, and we then adapting our curriculum to make sure we can take advantage of using that space.
And I think the physical activity thing basically stems all the way up from primary school. We spoke about this before, about the reason we're into primary schools is there's not enough physical activity in the particular area we're dealing with. So we found from the partnership wise, it was better to concentrate on fewer children. And by that, we still mean hundreds, but fewer children, so that we could actually impact them, understand what their PE provision is in school, understand what their PE provision was going to be in secondary school, and how can we supplement that with grants help to go into the right schools to say, okay, can we train students from our school to help and supplement PE lessons in a meaningful way? We spoke about this before, about the last thing I need to do is put students into a school where the teachers are then looking after the students, our students as well, because that's just a burden. However, if they go in and they are able to take the ratios from 30 to 1 to 7 or 8 to 1, it has an impact, doesn't it? And so when they come to you, they're far more aware of their sort of physical literacy than they would have been otherwise.